Good afternoon, LinkedIn. So great to be here today. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit, and you're watching a new episode of OK Boomer Live. So pleasing to be here today to talk about the effect that ocean freight has on the commodities and topics of the day. And I can't think of a better episode today to interject the world of ocean freight together with Tesla. I just read today that Tesla has become, I believe, the most valuable auto company in the U.S., or it's surpassed several companies. I saw a blurb on LinkedIn today. And it's fantastic that the company is having so much success. And I think that as we look at today's episode of OK Boomer Live TV, we are going to find that the most important two words to Tesla regarding Tesla, excuse me, are not Elon Musk, but rather a more nebulous spherical graphite. It's a tough one to say, spherical graphite. And we're going to get into a little bit about what that means for Tesla and my interpretation of some of the inner workings at Tesla. And I hope you'll enjoy the show because that's what we're designed to do here, is bring a little insight in terms of how ocean freight and the supply chain impacts our commercial and business world. Before we get started on today's episode, what really led me to come here today, in a very strange twist of fate and personas, is the combination of a 28-year-old rap musician, which I'll do a feature on in a video tomorrow, and the former governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick. In some ways brought me here today, and I'll explain. So this very eclectic, left brain, right brain thinking rap musician and I have been collaborating on writing projects for Ocean Audit. And this person is, besides being a really fun rap artist, they're the best, one of the best writers in the world. Highly educated, world traveler. What can I say? There's so much I can say about how I've enhanced my own personal business as CEO of Ocean Audit with their assistance. But one of the things that they got me thinking about is, big data is so valuable, right, to Wall Street, hedge funds, automotive companies, pharmaceutical companies, and ocean freight's all around us, and it really drives a lot of what we do in terms of the big data intelligence that the general public and the media don't really have insight to. And so when Deval Patrick was still at one of the hedge funds, I was encouraged by the rap musician, hey, the hedge funds, want to know what you know, right? And so I reached out to several hedge funds talking about different seasonal issues, Black Friday, and analysis I did. And I do this all the time if you know me and you know my work. And so Deval Patrick reached out to me and he said, Steve, this is really interesting stuff. And, we collaborated and we got into it a little bit more. But I just, I'll leave it at that because it's really interesting, and then here comes a U.S. presidential candidate that I had just been working with, 6 months or 9 months earlier on ocean freight big data. So I talked to a COO yesterday that one of my clients, and they've been following my work on LinkedIn, and they said, gee, it's interesting, Steve. Your business is from what we see publicly because some of my revenue figures are in the media, and you've done really well. You've hit this. You've had, and then he said, it cracks me up. And he said, you've reached celebrity status on LinkedIn. And I thought to myself, I don't get paid on monetizing LinkedIn. It would be nice down the road, of course, to to get sponsorships on all this stuff. And but I mean, I like the idea of celebrity status, that's for sure. But more as a thought leader in my industry and ocean freight, and that's really what the goal is, to broadcast a LinkedIn Live. And the serious side is that there are a lot of really interesting dynamics that the media doesn't know about. And I know I invited a lot of automotive executives to tune in today because obviously the strong interest. So without further ado, why don't we it's a bad joke, right? Lift the hood up a little bit and peek under Tesla's skirt and see if we can discern anything that might be relevant or topical for our continued discussion. So let me try to share my screen with you as best I can here, and help the effort to get into our little mini presentation today on Tesla, pre-holiday presentation we'll call it. So I think the screen share is coming up. That looks really good. So I call this show Revelations for the Mainstream Media. I wanted to do a little bit of story about the Shanghai Gigafactory, my observations on it as it relates to ocean, and a review of one of Tesla's number one big import products, the spherical graphite that I mentioned earlier. It's really interesting, right? So for those of you that are in the know, Tesla put together a giga battery factory in outside of Reno, Nevada, I believe, in a joint venture or a cross venture with Panasonic. And so for many years, Tesla was bringing in the lithium-ion batteries directly from Japan, and then the battery plant came online in Nevada, I believe, in 2018, not mistaken. And we moved to more of a raw product in the spherical graphite that comes in to help produce those, or actually is the raw material that makes those batteries. But let's jump into a little bit of some of the container count issues on Tesla before we get into a little bit of the heart of the story. So I think that one of the things that's really interesting in looking at periods of June 2018 to June 2019, and then June 2019 to June 2020, is that the raw materials and parts and components that Tesla has sourced from overseas via ocean freight has remained relatively stable. It's actually amazing. I had to do the numbers a couple times because I was so shocked that they had little change between one year to the next. And so that tells me, I guess a couple things intuitively, that, obviously they have to keep the right amount of flow going for their production in the pipeline. But it also tells me that from a ocean standpoint, that I would look at these numbers and I would say, they hadn't achieved that much more vehicle growth from one year to the next. And obviously they have. So that tells me that, either they've stockpiled material quite well, to avoid tariffs, in the 17-18 genre, or they've just done a better job sourcing, U.S.-made parts or Canadian-made parts that don't necessarily show up in the ocean statistics. But I thought it was a pretty fascinating look that their container counts have stayed relatively stable. And the big word that we're talking about today is the spherical graphite. This material, well, it's a product that's manufactured from flake graphite. It's a concentrate, and it goes through a bunch of treatments. And it's the product that really is its spherical shape allows the graphite to be more efficiently packed into the battery cells, but yet it controls the coating that comes in on the graphite. Extends the batteries, the graphite's lifetime battery capacity. So would you believe it or not that 100% of spherical graphite is sourced from China? It's about $3,000 a ton as a material, and it's very costly though to treat it and to bring it to the grade level that Tesla requires. So right now, Tesla has about 15 to 20% of the entire spherical graphite market. And there are probably somewhere between 7 to 12 battery plants around the world that non Tesla that are all craving this material. So I did some research on it, and the price of it's remained relatively stable for the last couple of years per ton to buy it, to source the material. But again, what is interesting is that 100% of the world's supply, uncoated supply, and then it gets treated, does come from China. There are pockets of this material in South Africa, and in Canada and Mexico, but certainly nowhere shaped near or form the level that there is in China. As a matter of fact, the director of the Benchmark Mineral Intelligence Agency, which kind of monitors these materials, they have said that those who control these critical raw materials and possess the manufacturing and processing know-how will hold the balance of industrial power in the 21st century auto and energy storage industries. So right now, this is technology that, in terms of technology, the minerals are coming from China. And again, one of the things that's fascinating about the ocean connection to this mineral is that, I didn't know this until I did the research, is that the product requires or is optimized when the containers are of the refrigerated nature. So this is a major shift, right? These are not just rocks coming in dry containers into Oakland and then being trucked to Nevada. These are minerals in refrigerated containers, and sometimes moving 7, 10, 15 containers on a bill of lading. So it's a big movement. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds a week of this mineral moving in. Now, what's interesting is a couple things. One is that the Nevada plant had a shutdown with COVID. There was 75% of the employees were laid off or furloughed, perhaps. That has changed. Obviously, some have come back on. But what's really interesting to notice about this, guys, is that when the spherical graphite shipments actually stopped or slowed down quite a bit during the COVID, and the regular lithium-ion batteries, the much more expensive finished product from Japan, seem to be coming in much higher quantities, right? So it makes sense, right? If the battery plant was furloughed, the Tesla still needed the lithium-ion batteries for the production line. So that's a really interesting strategy tactic that you won't see anywhere here other than OK Boomer Live TV. And by the way, I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, and we're talking Tesla. So the spherical graphite is one of the things that's just really fascinating about this is that on the research that I did on this spherical graphite is that this is coming from a vendor called BTR New Materials in Shenzhen. And this material is relatively new import for Tesla in terms of it just starting in really 2018, which makes sense and coincides with the start of the Giga battery factory in Shanghai. And I think that the competition right now, right, for this raw material is pretty hot and heavy, especially since a lot of these. I know I'm friends with an investor in the Czech Republic where there's a big battery factory coming on there. There's other obviously competing battery factories. And so I started to think, well, geez, all these battery factories and a lot of them in China, because the other issue too on these batteries, on mining the spherical graphite to get it into such a condition that's needed for production, it's a messy job, right? We're talking about environmental protection agency type, red flags that over in less developed countries, it's not so much an issue. So again, there are some technologies to harvest this material and get it to the auto grade level that don't harm the environment so much. But from what I understand, and again, I am not an expert on this particular mineral, but it is environmental. It's a lot of acid washing, and so when you start to do that, you're running into some issues. So I got to thinking, and let me see if you can kind of connect the dots to where I might be heading with this. Um, so right now, as I mentioned, they're up to about 20% of the world's graphite production. Spherical graphite production, and again, that's all from China, right? So now we fast forward to the Shanghai Gigafactory, right? And this picture doesn't do it justice, but there are new constructions being made in the general area within this factory grid here, which I believe my research has indicated is going to also host some battery production similar to the Nevada facility. So let's put two and two together. Spherical graphite from China. China, the only true source. A battery factory potentially, or actually in China, at the Gigafactory. Elon Musk saying, hey, we're going to reassess and reevaluate Fremont factory. So all these things started kind of like going through my head as I put together the segment. And I started to think, could it actually be a potential turn where more and more of the Teslas are made in China because you don't have to transport the main component that these beautiful machines need, which is a derivative of the spherical graphite? Could it potentially mean a stronger movement of autos being made offshore? I don't have the answers on that. I'm really speculating. But to me, this is the way my mind thinks in terms of how to use the data. And, not that the transportation is expensive. They're going Shanghai to Oakland on these reefers. But if the goods of the graphite's being mined right there in China, and there's competition to get the materials from the other battery factories that are coming on board or that are in production, obviously the price may go up, and maybe it's better to hedge your bets and to do some production overseas. But one of the things that I found that was helpful to help me understand what might be happening with production in the Gigafactory is my data was able to look at, although not a great segment or snapshot of what's going into the Gigafactory in Shanghai to help populate it and produce cars, I was able to find a very unique trend of three major Canadian vendors that in Ontario that are supplying suspension parts, brake assembly parts, and door hinges from North America to the Gigafactory in Shanghai. I read that only 30% of the Gigafactory parts in Shanghai were being sourced locally. So that tells me that obviously there's other production coming in, and it could be from Mexico or other countries that my data is not picking up on. And again, this is a pretty weak, I will go out and say this is a weak, W-E-A-K, weak slide, because this doesn't give you the magnitude. Yes, these shipments are occurring fairly often now, and these are all happening within the last month or two or three. So we do see a movement of supply nature moving towards the Gigafactory in that regards. So the goods are, Shanghai Gigafactory is ramping up. Before I forget, I think I wanted to just jump off and tell you show you a little bit better detail on the spherical graphite process, because I think it's really important. Pardon me, as it helps back my theory in terms of the complexity of this particular mineral and how important it is to Tesla to keep their production at full swing. So let me see if I can just share with you that particular screen. I think I can do that. And oh yeah, sorry guys. This is actually, before I do that, this is actually the picture I wanted to show you before on the Gigafactory in Shanghai, where over here where the arrows are pointing, the expansion and the new buildings. So that's where their growth is coming from. And this is as of a shot, a photo as of May 20th, 2020. So real recently. This is the Shanghai Gigafactory for Tesla. So let me just give you a little bit more rundown on the spherical graphite, because I think that's the buzzword that you guys should be talking about today. Is that you had no idea, right, that this is the mineral needed to run these beautiful machines, and I just found it fascinating myself, and I hope you will as well when I show you this last slide. And let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'll take my let me take my cam out and just go right to the slide. It might be a little better. Yeah, there you go. So I think what you see there is you start at the low end. The blue end is really the mining aspect, where you have the flake mining, then the separation and dyeing process, and then more of the production process in the red, to mill it and to produce it, purify it, clean it, acid wash it, and then coat it with its special properties. And so obviously, as you go up the value stream, the costs are increasing for the production. So these are being produced fully coated in China, and so that's another reason why I think that there is maybe more to what meets the eye in terms of the Gigafactory in Shanghai playing a more important role downstream with Tesla's production. So I hope today's presentation was effective and useful to you to help see some of the insights on how containers tell a telling tale on what's happening with regards to major entities like Tesla. Next week, we'll be talking about Amazon and my hypothesis on Amazon setting up their own ocean vessels to have a very fast service from China to the US. And we'll get into that on the next episode of OK Boomer Live. Until now, you can watch this episode on demand on LinkedIn and my YouTube channel, which is OK Boomer TV. So I'm Steve Ferreira signing off for now, wishing you all a safe and prosperous and happy Labor Day. Any questions, please email me, stevef@oceanaudit.com, or just leave a comment here in the comment field. And I'll work with you in any capacity related to the ocean freight genre, or my own capacity as CEO of Ocean Audit. Everyone's needing post-COVID-19 cash, and one of the most effective ways to do that is through a very detailed ocean freight refund recovery that can be done in as little as 96 hours. So that's my day job, just for those that don't know me. And I'll say goodbye and take care. Thanks for watching OK Boomer Live with Steve Ferreira, your host. Cheers.